you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change.
Welcome back, listeners. This is Octavia's Parables, a podcast where we are reading chapter by chapter through Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. This week, we are in Parable of the Talents, chapter 17. I am your co-host, Adrienne Marie Brown.
I'm Toshi Regan.
And do we have any news in the Octavia Butler sphere today?
God has changed. That's all I got today.
All the time. I think that this is in the Octavia Butler sphere, which is this news just came out that N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy is going to be made into films, and she is going to be doing the adaptations herself,
Whoa.
Which is massive, massive, wonderful news. For anyone who hasn't read that trilogy, it is awesome. She is an incredible writer. And I think it's very much in the line of stories that Octavia, the kind of stories that Octavia writes for us, right? Massive, big, epic, wild stories with lots of characters and relationships and shape-shifting and all the things. It's all in that trilogy. So that feels related. Congratulations, NK, for landing that. We're proud of you. We can't wait to watch
awesome.
what you come up with. Yeah.
Yo, I should say, we have Parable of the Sower, Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower opera places happening for 2022. And there's going to be some announcements. It's happening. I don't know how it's happening. I don't know what the configurations of coming together will be. But we have a long time to figure it out and evolution around it. But I would say Boston, DC, DMV area, Ann Arbor. We would definitely be to those places next year. We gonna be going places.
That's very exciting. Congratulations on that. We're ready.
I'm so excited about it.
I'm like, the royal we are very ready to see that show.
Yeah, we are. You coming? You coming?
Again. I'm going to be there. Has it changed? Are you continuing to shift and change it for each place? Or is it kind of like we've landed this plane and now we're just going to bring it?
I mean, it doesn't matter what we think. It always changes because, I'll be doing my parable path with people and be collaborating, and the communities insist on it being specific, and when I say insist, it's it's just an obvious thing. The actual room shifts it, then the producers and the presenters having usually offerings that change it. We just have become very adaptable, and then I feel very I feel very expanded by this process of doing. We definitely would kicked one great song out to put in another great song, because I was like, we're actually, we become unafraid of that. We actually are like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen here. That's, we become excited about it. So, it's taking on the actual journey, which is you don't necessarily know exactly what's coming around the corner, but you're adapting and shaping as you go.
That's right. That's beautiful.
That's how we're moving.
That's going to be a big year of parables.
It's going to be a big.
It's going to be a really big year.
It's going to be a big year of parables. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to singing with everybody, and this is where we're going. That I forgot. Champaign-Urbana.
Don't forget Champaign-Urbana.
Don't forget Champaign-Urbana. How could I?
Forget Champaign-Urbana.
Don't forget about it now. So, and there's some more, on the outskirts. I can't say nothing yet, but
yeah, we won't demand the secret locations, the top secret locations yet. It is interesting to start to think about things reopening and where to go, and I feel like parables is something worth traveling for. So
yeah,
that's good news.
We appreciate the people who travel.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Here we are, chapter 17 in Parable of the Talents, if you're reading along with us. And Toshi, bring us in.
Okay. From Earthseed, the Books of the Living, all prayers are to self, and in one way or another, all prayers are answered. Pray, but be aware. Your desires, whether or not you achieve them, will determine who you become. Yeah. And here we are with Larkin again. And she is wondering what her life would have been like if her mom had found her. And this must just be, this character is so incredible. This 105th time of reading this.
Yep. I'm like, she's so amazing.
I'm just like, I'm finding deeper empathy and for this journey and the way that Octavia set it up with this character, and she is looking at her life and looking at her mom's life, and she is doing that thing that she did a lot at the beginning of the book, where she really was like, there's me and there's Earthseed. And basically these are the two choices that she feels, her mom had, and she picked Earthseed, so she wonders if there would be, she wonders if she would have been helpful or her weakness. And she says Earthseed was her strength. No wonder it was her favorite. And as you read,
it so hurts.
Yeah, it hurts so much. And as you're reading this, you just, you're seeing her story, and you're seeing what Lauren is doing to try to find her. And you're just like, oh my God, the ache is deep. So from the Journals of Lauren Oya Alamina, Sunday, April 8th, 2035, Lauren has decided to go out on her own, and she has left Georgetown. She's left her students. She's left her room, and she left some money and some guns with Allie, so she'll have something to fall back on if she's robbed. Always planning, always trying to look ahead, And she heads for the message cache that they all decided where they would leave things, and so she goes there, and she's looking to see if anybody left any notes for her. And she got notes from Travis and Natividad and from Michael and Noriko, and nobody's found their kids. So it was good to know that, but nobody's found their children. However, they all have phones now. And so she left a message and gave their phone numbers, the phone number of, Harry, and the phone number of herself, and then said Justin is with us. So I can imagine that people hearing about Justin is going to be very hopeful. And she wrote the words, God is change. And she says she found that she hasn't thought about Earthseed so much in the last few months. She says that she knows Earthseed has helped her to survive Camp Christian. So God has changed, God has changed, God has changed. And she's lost none of her belief in all that she said. If you all remember, she had that really incredible conversation when Bankole asked her, what is the plan? Because she had decided not to go to the, was it Halstead, the other community? Yeah. And Bankole's like, all right, if I'm hanging with you, I need to know what the plan is. And so she had said everything. So the destiny is as significant as ever. And even though Acorn is gone, it was precious, but it wasn't essential. And I think that's so powerful. So she's sitting there and she's trying to think of a plan. She settled herself actually inside of a redwood tree that's big enough to hold about 3 people. And she's in there and she's thinking and trying to get things going. And she also reflects on that. She, uses the name Corey Duran, and she says, and she starts to teach people. She uses some Earthseed lines to teach people. She's not actually trying to get them to be an Earthseed, but she just is saying, all that you touch, you change. Or to get along with God, consider the consequences of your behavior. Or belief initiates and guides action, or it does nothing. Or kindness eases change. And gives, and these are some of our favorites that we always see on the internet, like everybody sharing and stuff. So she says some people are like, that's really cool, and other people are like, what you talking about? But but the big thing is that she is just like, all of these verses, all of this earthseed knowledge really needs the destiny. The destiny is essential to Lauren. Well, this is the thing. The destiny is essential, but she gets to this understanding about like acorn is something that could be killed and taken away. And so she is like making an adjustment to this idea of like, oh, we need to go somewhere and be there and plant all of our seeds in this place. And then now we are arrived to, we need to hold it, I think, within ourselves and maintain our trajectory to the destiny. So she says, I'm going to just read here. She says, I must find at least a few people who are willing to learn more and who will be willing to teach what they've learned. I must build not a physical community this time. I guess I understand at last how easy it is to destroy such a community. I need to create something wide-reaching and harder to kill. That's why I must teach teachers. I must create not only a dedicated little group of followers, not only a collection of communities as I once imagined, but a movement. And so she is reshaping her vision around that. But before she does any of that, she must find her child. And she goes out alone, and she says, I know it's stupid to travel alone. And she had just in the last chapter been saying, what is Harry doing traveling alone? But she's doing it. And she just, she has all of these fears around what would, Larkin grow up to be and how she would think about her family. And would she think her kidnappers were her family? And she'll start walking towards Eureka. And I always like Eureka because when I was a kid, all the lesbians was always talking about Eureka. And I was like, what's Eureka? I'm in D.C. like, what is this magic lesbian paradise of Eureka? So,
inquiring minds need to know.
Yeah, we do need to know, but that's not where she is not going to a lesbian paradise. She is walking with a 45 semi-automatic gun, and it's the same gun she had when she left Robledo. And in this chapter, there's a lot of reflection back to that old community, that things that she has with her and lessons that she learned from them and things like that. One of the things that she notes is that there are so many soldiers on the road. So, don't forget, we had this big war with Canada and Alaska, and we was losing. And so we backed, down, and it just petered out. But all of these soldiers have nothing to do. They don't have jobs and they don't have things, but they have all their weapons, and they are walking around very weaponized with nothing to do.
Danger.
Yeah, danger. And then this is also, of course, led to there being more slavers, that Jared's Crusaders have joined the Cougars of the world and collaring people and grabbing their kids and all of the other horrific behaviors, and there's nothing stopping that right now. So it's a growing movement of more slavers, more soldiers, which is really men with weapons without a focus or a destiny, so to speak. So this is a dangerous world that she's walking around in, and she's working for meals and sometimes a place to sleep, and she's just having this kind of like, laborer's life as she tries to gather up information to see if she can find her child. This is a really awful state of existence. And again, I keep saying this because I just think it's important not to get used to it, to like really say it out loud, because otherwise you just, you assume it, but you don't, it's not activated. It's just like settling in somewhere. And her and Dolores had talked about this before she left. And Dolores says that, even though she knows what she's doing is dangerous, they set up a system so that Dolores will vouch for her. And I don't know if you all remember this before, but Dave Turner had taught Lauren about what the existence of being like especially a black man on the road, that it's very easy for you to get picked up and turned into a laborer. And one of the things you need is for someone to vouch for you if you get picked up in order to get out, which Day Turner didn't have. So Dolores is going to vouch for her for a fee because Dolores is a businesswoman. But she says that, she really understands what Lauren is doing. And she said, I do the same thing myself. I do all I could do. Goddamn these so-called religious people, thieves and murderers. That's all they are. They should wear the collar. They should roast in hell. So that is the line on that. And then we move to Sunday, April 15th, 2035. And Lauren is just steadily working for her food, working to get and navigate everything. How can she find out information, and how can she stay alive and out of danger while she does it? And she has so many skills. It's very easy for her to find work. And she thinks that she is having herself look like, a kind of tall black man moving around the world. And she is sleeping in this park. She's sleeping in, people's garages. Whatever people will give her, she's using it. And she's also, waking up achy and everything because she is like sleeping on floors and sleeping in trees and sleeping and everything. So eventually there is a shelter, the Christian America Center on 4th Street. And someone says, you should just go there and go to sleep. And she is just like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah, seriously.
You know what I'm saying? Like, she just cannot deal with it. Like, she is just like, a lot of people say they avoid that. People disappear there. So there are moments when she is just like, I would just end up killing people if I went there. Like, she can't. She can't. And then she's also terrified that someone will recognize her. But eventually, she is going to make her way to the Christian American Center. And she couldn't sleep there. And she was like, again, thinking about Day Turner's experience. And she just was like, I'm not going to sleep there. But she starts to go. She can get meals and she can start to source information. And she's also has this nervousness that she might find some of the other kids. So if she found the other kids and she had to get the other kids, she knows she can't come back and be like, hi, has anybody seen this black girl? And so she's just like, that's hard because she's not going to pass up finding any of the kids. So she's just, always thinking about multiple things at one time and trying to see as much of a trajectory that she's in. And she goes there. They make this stew with this vegetables and potatoes, and it's flavored with beef, but nobody ever finds any meat. And people are like, yo, where's the meat? But she just couldn't deal with it. You have to imagine her just appearing as a very traumatized, inside person. Don't come near me. Don't talk to me. Don't touch me. She is in a state of terror while she's doing this. She doesn't know really how she looks to other, but she said they probably thought that I had, some kind of issues going on mentally. She couldn't talk to anyone. But she's terrorized. And so she focused on food. She just was like, I am going to eat food here. And that's what I'm going to do. And that was enough. That's all she could do. And she says, I have never in freedom been so afraid. People edged away from me. I mean, junkies and whores and thieves edged away from me. And so she's really trying to give you this very visceral. When you read this, you will see how Octavia describes this. And she wrapped her gun. She intentionally wrapped her gun in her spare clothes and put it in the bottom of her bag and the bottom of her pack because she was too afraid she would start shooting people. She was too afraid that she would kill people. So she put it down where it's really, 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 really hard to get to, that it would take her some effort. So she's even putting in a plan to keep her from killing people if she gets triggered too much. I don't know about you, but my gun would have been right on top of my bag. It would have been the first thing I had access to. So we know how good at this I would have been. But just like, first day out, just
like, well, sorry. Failed the mission.
I will fail incredibly. I can tell the truth about myself.
You got to know yourself.
You got to know yourself. That's what it's just so, she had gone back there a few times, and then eventually she saw a man there who was in rough shape, and then she realized that he was a version of herself when she first started showing up. People were like, don't go near him, leave him alone, and she was like, he looked like me. He was just eating, and he looked like he would kill you if you came near, and she imagines that's how she looked. So she never learned about the orphan children or Jared's Crusaders. People have mentioned that they had kids, but she never learned anything. And so she went back for the third and last night, same food. They throw in different vegetables, and she's just kind of talking about this. And the one thing you have to do to get this meal is you have to listen to a sermon. And so after you eat, they close the door so you can't leave. And then you got to listen to this sermon. And she said, my first sermon, I couldn't remember if my life depended on it. The second sermon was about Christ curing the sick and being willing to cure us too if we only ask. The third was about Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the lay minister who delivered the third sermon was Mark. It was him, my brother, a lay minister in the Church of Christian America. In fear and surprise, she just hit herself. And, I wrote in big letters, yo, fuck Mark, at the top of my page. Yeah, Mark is seriously. Just like Mark. I really empathize with Mark because I do think that Mark was not given what he needed at Acorn. So I really empathize with his journey. But this is horrible. And the thing is that she's worried that he's seen her, but she keeps herself down. There's so many different kinds of people, ethnicities, of men there. And so she's pretty sure he didn't see her, but she's concerned. And she takes a look, and then he is preaching, and he mentions that he had a sister who was steeped in sin, a sister who had been raised in the way of the Lord, but who had permitted herself to be pulled down by Satan. This sister had, through the influence of Satan, done him great injury, he said. But he had forgiven her. Ooh. He loved her. It hurt him that she would not turn from sin. It hurt him that he had to turn from her. He shed a few tears and shook his head. At last he said, Jesus Christ was your Savior yesterday. He is your Savior today. He will be your Savior forever. Your sister might desert you. Your brother may betray you. Your friends may try to pull you down into sin, but Jesus will always be there for you.
All my appointed time, I'm gonna wait till my change comes. All my appointed time, I'm gonna wait till my change comes. All my appointed time, I'm gonna wait till my change comes. Job said the Lord God giveth, the Lord God taketh away. Job said, blessed be the name of the Lord. Servant ran and told Job, he said, all your cattle are dead. Servant ran and told Job.
And when it was over, Lauren just tries to get out, and she had to figure out, how to reach Mark. And what she ends up doing is, leaving a note and signing the note Bennett O. And she thought about writing Lauren O. or writing her, name Corey Duran, but that's Mark's mother, so she felt like that was insensitive. And what's really interesting, Adrian, here is that she actually doesn't assume that Mark turned them in.
Exactly.
I'm like,
Mark's not safe. I'm like, Mark's not safe.
No.
He thinks you're a sinner. And I think it's fascinating because literally the sermon is him being like, family will betray you, but this will not. This takes precedent. And yeah, it's shocking that it hasn't occurred to her that that's a possibility.
It's really shocking. And I think, also probably steeped in a lot of the trauma that she's experiencing. But she gets a night inside of a garage. She chopped weeds and cleared trash for this man. He lets her sleep in the garage. There's actually an old, toilet and a sink with running water. And it's a real luxury. She got to wash and she got to, make a decent bed for herself. But of course, she could not sleep. She saw her brother and he was with those people. And she wonders if he had seen her. She just wonders what would happen if he had recognized her. And that's 17.
Yeah.
And I wrote at the end, Mark, oh my God. It's like, it's everything.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that. This storyline, it just keeps moving. There's like so much happening here. So I want to go back to Larkin, this piece where she's like really imagining how her life would have been different if her mom had actually found her and saved her. Makes me have a question of what is a change in your life that you think would have made it very different? Particularly if there's something where it's like, oh, if this fork in the road, if I had gone a different way, or if someone had found me, or if someone had intervened on this harm, or, is there something like that you're like, this, I think my life would have been really, really different. And just take a moment, with that, be with that, imagine what that different path might have looked like. And how do you come to be at peace with the life that you're in? My second question is this tension between Earthseed and Larkin. As Larkin experiences it, as Lauren experiences it. And if you remember back to your own childhood, did you ever feel in competition with your parents' work? Did you have the experience when you were younger of feeling like, especially if your parent was purpose-driven, cause-driven, justice-oriented, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel like you were in competition with that? And if you currently parent, how do you balance that parenting work with your calling? Or is it the practice of your calling or deeply related, or do you feel that tension?
That's such a good question. People always thought I was like, they were like, how do you and your mom do it? And I was like, I think this is like our 15th long life journey together. Yeah. It's like,
we've been doing it.
Yeah, we've been doing it. I was like, there's no, I was like, first of all, what is there to compete over? It's just, we're just both who we are. But we both, we resisted people's desire to actually create. They either to mush us, so to be like, when we did events together, nobody could say Bernice and Toshi Regan. So they had to say both of our names separately. And then that people would try to mush our work. And we were just like, what are you doing? No. Like, just see us for ourselves. That's a good question.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And, I feel like I hear it from people who grow up with movement parents often, where they're like, I felt like set to the side, or, that the vision that they were working for was more important than, the raising process. But sometimes I look back at that and I think that a lot of that has to do with feminism, like, and patriarchy, and like where the balance of child raising was traditionally held. So it's like that particular sense of like, oh, this person who in other families, I see their mothers with them. And in mine, I see my mother, being a feminist right as this is really just in the new stages. These past few generations are still relatively new stages of this shift. So I see that, I think many of us experience like fathers being less present, but because that was also socialized as a norm. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's fascinating how, as those gender dynamics shift, that also impacts what happens inside of movement, and who feels like they're getting enough parent time. And I see this parent struggling with this all the time.
Yeah.
Parents in my life, I'm just sort of like, it's not a thing where you love something more or less. Or it's just like, this is my child. Like, it's unquestionable and unconditional love. And there's myself, there's my call. And I think it's a beautiful thing to start to be, I feel like, in more and more community where we're trying to hold that it's like everyone gets to be themselves and we're raising kids.
Right.
And we're figuring out what that looks like. The next question is really about Earthseed and Acorn, and like really Earthseed going beyond what Acorn could hold or could sustain. The question I have for listeners is, do you have any ideas that you hold that feel more precious to you than the institutions that currently carry those ideas or are currently associated with those ideas? Right? What ideas do you hold that feel more precious than the institutions that are currently associated with it? And, I think about this a lot for people of faith.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, y'all's institutions can be kind of, trash, but the ideas are often love.
Yeah.
Like big love and big faith and big surrender and, transformation and justice. And like, there's massive ideas that I'm like, down with those. But the institutions are where those human tendencies and patterns of harm play out. So just be thinking about that, Maybe the institutions are too vulnerable to hold the ideas. Maybe the institutions are too stuck in old ideas to hold a new idea.
Right.
I think nonprofits get stuck in this. It's like, we're dreaming of freedom, but we're practicing incarceration,
Oh, shoot.
So. And then a question I have, which I think we're in the time of vision. And I am so moved by Lauren, like getting to watch her go through the process, the interior process of recognizing that what she's trying to build is not just a pattern, a network, but a movement. She's like, what I am creating is actually really huge. And so I want to ask our listeners, do you hold a movement-sized vision within you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you hold a movement-sized vision within you? And I love that she's holding this vision while working in disguise, while being a day laborer, while being homeless, while or houseless, while in transit. And I think this tied in question is, who do you view as someone who could hold a movement-sized vision? Or who do you view as someone who could hold destiny? And particularly when you see people who are doing physical labor, when you see people who are doing that kind of work, of cleaning and gathering and, breaking things up and building things, do you see those people as people of destiny? People who could be holding movement-sized vision? Like, hint, hint. You should. Right? You should. Yeah. Now, the next question is around this juxtaposition of the war with the slave culture that's developing and the violence that's developing. And I think we're in a question right now as a society, which I want to name here, is how do we relinquish the socialization and the work of violence and control? So much of our societal structure is around controlling each other, controlling the borders, controlling what we think of as our safety zones, protecting our families, whatever it is, but doing it all through the acts of violence. And so we have these periods of war where then people come back from those wars and bring that violence home, along with all that breaks when we're separated from each other while going through traumatic events, along with the grief for all the people who don't come home, and along with the shame for a lot of people once they're there and realize what they've been forced into. And then they come home with nothing clear to do necessarily, not necessarily met and taken care of, not necessarily held and given possibility to return to their humanity in some way. And so then we see the wave of domestic violence incidents. And then we see, those folks moving into policing, those folks moving into, probation and corrections officers and other work. And so it just becomes this flowing river of violence through our society. And how do we relinquish our sense that creates safety?
Yes. I do think the defund the police movement is a movement of healing. And
I do
you know, and I think that there's that why is there so much effort and money and power going towards making sure people, you know, in particular cisgendered men, in particular cisgendered white men, have access to weapons, you know, to guns, and like guns way past the capacity of like, well, I want to be able to defend myself in case. But why do you need that? Why do you need to hold on to it? And I think I talked about, there's many stories, but I think I talked about that, like the singer Tony Bennett, you know, talking about like, you know, when he was like, you got to go, and they're like, you're going to go to war. And they gave him a choice of like, which one you want to go. And then whatever he said, they picked the opposite. And then in a very short amount of time, he was 18 years old. He was on the front lines. And, you know, fighting for his life. And what he said, and what a lot of people have said, is this is the lowest form of human existence. This is the, you know, and it's the lowest form of any, I think, any species. Like, we just puts us at the bottom of everybody. So you know, people are very nervous to say defund the police. Even Obama, I think defunding the police is a small part of the whole thing. It's like, no, we're going to challenge this. But I really hope that people find the, you know, the courage at this point in our existence to really introduce and sustain the idea of a healing movement that does not contain these weapons, that where That's conflict right. is actually resolved in a multiple kind of ways. And unless you need to take over other people's places, like unless you need to like actually enslave people, unless you need to do, you know, put your hands where they don't belong, like why do you need such weapons? You know, why do you need these weapons? Like these weapons come out of like the most horrific thing, and we all don't need them if we stop these behaviors. And I think that the defunding and redistributing, and we're just talking about, you know, we're just talking about money.
We are. I mean, there's that piece of it.
Yep.
And I think, you know, what you're talking about, which is like Tony Bennett is basically a veteran against war. And there's so many incredible groups of veterans against the war. I remember the first time I came across the work of the Iraq veterans against the war, and just feeling like, okay, there are people who really come from this culture, who know what it's like to get pulled into it, who know what it's like to feel like it's the only option, who come out of that space and are like, I still have a life ahead of me and I want to find a different relationship to it. And I think that some of the greatest leadership, thought leadership and practice leadership amongst us is in those populations of people who are like, I made this choice. I am a veteran and I have come out of this space. And being able to connect that to defund the police, being able to connect that to a real nuanced and intelligent conversation around the Second Amendment, being able to connect that to how we resolve conflict with each other, being able to connect it all back to abolition. It's like, it really is a massive cultural shift that's being advanced on so many different front lines right now, and being exposed as necessary in so many ways right now. So I think I hope we're in a time where it's kind of like the death throes of this way of being, that we're starting to recognize something else. I see it even in the way people are rejecting the militarism of Israel, that hyper-militarized nation. It's like us and Israel and a few other places are really like holding this particular line. And I hope that we are at the end of our success in that holding, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Like, I really hope that we are in a place where, whether it's that we shift our values or that we become post-nationalist, that we're really like, the nation state is perhaps inherently violent as long as it necessitates a domination to exist, perhaps we can advance ourselves beyond that. So think about this. Be with your group around this. Think about, again, how this shows up in your own life. I know for me, I'll be very vulnerable here, that going through the pandemic brought to the surface my control shit. Like I feel justified in being absolutely in control of every single thing that's happening around me. But I'm not actually in control of everything that happens around me. I'm not in control of the other people around me. But I noticed that that's showing up, that like I will control things. And if someone crosses my boundary, I will punish them. And I'm like, it starts there. It starts small. It starts intimate. It starts in your own life. Always these things start small. And then they grow into something that feels like, how do I protect myself? Like how can I be safe? So examine where is control showing up in you? What can you do to soften your own grip? Right? 2 more questions I have, and then I think we can see where we're at. One is this one of mine versus ours. What do you think of as being your own, and what do you think of as being collective? And this shows up in this chapter in 2 ways that kind of flow with each other. One is vision, right? That Lauren is holding this vision of Earthseed and recognizing that in order for it to really reach what it's meant to reach, it has to become an ours vision. Like there has to be other people who are studying it, practicing it beyond what she's been able to achieve. So there's something where she's aware that like, I have to take this thing that is mine and make a big ours around it. But then this really feels relevant around the children question, that, she's really having to reckon with, do I try to save our children, or do I wait until I can save my child? And how do you hold this? Who are the children that are yours? Who are the children that are ours? What society, what community shapes around a world in which the children belong to the individuals versus the children belong to the community? And then my final question, as I see a gun-toting, gun-waving Toshi coming in the Christian America space, is how do you mitigate your righteous and perhaps murderous rage?
Yeah.
I feel like so many people have said this over the years. James Baldwin's talked about this. Toni Morrison wrote about this. Like so many people have said, the rage is so righteous. The rage makes sense. The rage is a logical reaction to what's going on. And it's not always the strategic choice. Given the power dynamics that we're in, it's not often the strategic choice. What Lauren is trying to achieve here is to have a place to sleep and to find out information and to take on a shape that doesn't align with being able to act from that rage. So her mitigation is to wrap her gun all the way up, tuck it into the middle of things where she cannot easily access it, knowing that she's going into a space where the righteous side of her rage would be justified in anything she did, right? These are the people that justified and were complicit in every violation that has happened to her community and her family and her. So what do we do? We're walking around every day like having to, drive by the police who we know have killed our people, right? What do we do when we're moving through these institutions that are mistreating and abusing us? What do we do? How do we deal with that? How do we mitigate the righteous rage? And when I say mitigate, it doesn't mean disappear it, right? In some ways, it's almost how do we harness it towards destiny? How do we harness it towards something that takes us beyond these conditions? Not just the short satisfaction of revenge, but the long satisfaction of complete and total transformation, making these conditions impossible.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I feel like it's taken me a long time to understand the power of anger and rage. I think it's only with the harnessing of that rage, in addition to everything else, that we can get to that transformative space. But, I was reading this and I was thinking like, I want to send Lauren a copy of Love and Rage by Lama Rod Owens and just be in conversation with her that honors her rage and how she's strategizing around it.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I also think about people who had a nonviolent, practice in a really violent situation. And so part of their practice was withstanding violence, like physical violence and the violence of being incarcerated and and all of the other things. I remember I was at a certain age, and all of these kind of civil rights activists were like dying in their 40s, mostly men. And of course, I think about my dad and the struggles that he had in his life, and so like when we're looking at the way that you evolve from like great harm, and also have made a decision that like actually a way for us to be successful is to withstand like the great harm we know is coming. Like we're going to break laws, we're going to, and the law gives them the right to like actually do all of these things. And we know that like it's very rare that anyone will be held accountable for their abusing those lines. So we really, I just got asked to clear some music for my mom, and it's a story on the freedom rides, and it's this, I'll link when it comes out. It's not out yet, but it's I think a museum is doing it, and they have like people narrating it. And it was so chilling because the first person was talking about like how they were, how they got on the bus, and how they had like a National Guards person on the bus with the bayonet out. They had like police on either side of them. They had all of this stuff. And it was like, we were feeling pretty good. And then they like get to the next place, and like all of that disappeared, and everything happened to people. So it's such a thing to walk into the place that is dangerous to get someplace else. Like that's, how we're going to get to it? We're going to walk right into where we know not only is it dangerous, but they literally, like legally or not, have the right to inflict danger and inflict violence on your body. I just have no... I always wonder, like, if I have to make that decision, can I do it? And I just never know what the answer is. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it feels so circumstantial. It feels so like, once you've gone through so much, right? There's certain things it's like, I would only do this to find my child.
Right.
I would only risk this, for survival's sake. And I love, this idea of like, how do we navigate it? I think there's a lot of popular culture things right now that are in this, Handmaid's Tale, which is like basically taking our stories of enslavement and putting them into the realm of like feminism.
Yes.
That's how I look at, that's how I watch that, is I'm like, that's what our ancestors went through. And like, how scary would that be for these white women, But it also is like, they're doing a beautiful job of really building up the piece around how angry we actually get in the face of the trauma and the assault and everything that happens to us. And then how do we navigate? Right. And how do we survive? And I'm brought to mind, I'm thinking of Lawrence McEwen, who is an Northern Irish freedom fighter, Northern Ireland freedom fighter, who we got to spend some time with. And he talked about this, he was like in community with Bobby Sands, and they talked about our revenge will be the laughter of our children. Right? That it's like actually taking the rage into and harnessing it such that it can completely transform the conditions so that the next generations do not have to suffer in the ways that we suffered. That is the true revenge. That is the true response. That is the true beyond. And we're always heading there. And there's thoughts about Marcus, but I didn't have a question about him yet. I feel like there's more coming with him. And so I'm going to let that simmer. I'm just sort of like, there's so much coming with him. So yeah, that's where I'm at. But I'm just like, let's just be in the rage.
I feel you on that.
Yeah. Oof. All right, y'all. That is our episode. We're, as always, really grateful that you're joining us. And Octavia's Parables is co-hosted by myself, Adrienne Marie Brown, and Toshi Regan. We are produced by Kat Aaron, and our show art is by Krista Franklin.
Our music for Octavia's Parables is Always See the Stars, written and performed by Toshi Regan. God Has Changed, written by Toshi Regan, performed by Toshi Regan and Bernice Johnson Regan. And Job, performed by Toshi Regan and Bernice Johnson Regan.
And you can find us on Twitter at oparables. Sustain our show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/oparables or readingoctavia.com. Oh, no, not or. Or you can visit readingoctavia.com for our transcripts. I'm like, woo.
Yay. That's for when we elevate our podcast.
Exactly. I'm like, we love our website. We love when you support the show. That's all.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We did it.
We did it.
Another one down.
All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change.